and welcome to another episode of the BetaKit podcast. I am Douglas Saltis, editor-in-chief of BetaKit, and my co-host, as always, is Rob Kennedy. I often describe this podcast as one dedicated to talking Canadian tech and tech from a Canadian perspective. It is a framing that allows us to capture global context while still keeping focused on important conversations in Canadian tech. But sometimes those conversations can't be contained within such a limited context. Sometimes they become the context, like with COVID, or the Black Lives Matter movement, or the invasion of Ukraine and the attack on its sovereignty. Make no mistake, this is a global event with impacts that are complex and well beyond the concerns and considerations of a tech podcast. But it's also an event impacting real people. People you may know, people you may work with, people who build the tools and tech you use every day. To ignore that would be to turn a blind eye to the personal because we are overwhelmed by the political. So today we're speaking to two people, Ilya Brotsky, CEO of VanHack, and Daryna Kulya, co-founder and COO of OpenPhone. Both have personal connections to what is happening in Ukraine, and both are using their businesses to do something about it. And both know that this is a much bigger conversation than tech, even if that's what we try to talk about today. Let's dig in. I want to thank you both for joining us. I think, Ilya, I want to start with you simply because your business is about bringing people to Canada. And given both what's going on in Ukraine and the number of people that we're seeing kind of fleeing the country, it seems like to be the most topical place to start. Can you talk a little bit about what VanHack has been kind of offering and how you're looking to get either displaced workers or Ukrainians very much interested in say, living and working in Canada out of the country right now?
So we started helping people from Ukraine relocate to Canada before the invasion. We've been seeing an uptick in interest from candidates in that region wanting to move. And we had two hires actually right before the invasion there in February. Once we saw that happen, we decided to move quickly and help companies connect with Ukrainian candidates. So we sent out an email the day of, I believe, the invasion happened, saying we have here X amount of Ukrainian engineers looking to relocate. And since then, it's been really overwhelming. We decided to waive our fees for all hires from Ukraine till the end of the year. We've had about 500 companies sign up, 6,500 companies' page views of Ukrainian profiles. We had 342 chat messages sent to Ukrainian candidates and 78 interview requests. And so far, we've had 5 offers, and 3 of which have been accepted. So we're working hard to get as many candidates who want to relocate to do that, although there have been some challenges.
Yeah, let's talk about that and maybe set some of those numbers in context, because I think anyone unfamiliar with this space or even problems that Canadian tech has had trying to get global talent to the country, which is something that we've covered extensively on this podcast, might see 5 candidates being a small number. But just walk through how that pipeline works and maybe some of the additional struggles you're facing on top of the standard process of getting someone from anywhere else in the world to Canada.
Well, for context, we usually get 500 companies signing up in a quarter. So having 500 companies sign up in 2 weeks has been incredible. Just the outpouring of companies from across Canada as well as Europe, where we also operate. And the 5 hires, it definitely is not a huge number, but it's a work in progress. We have a lot of interviews happening that we don't know about simply because we've abandoned our standard operating procedure of having interviews happen on the VanHack platform, and we've just said, hey, here's a list of candidates who are interested in relocation or new opportunities, reach out directly. And we just wanted to eliminate as much friction that way. What's been challenging is men who are in Ukraine can't leave, which is making it definitely harder. A lot of the candidates as well just aren't in a mental place to be able to interview. We've had candidates say, hey, I'm actually in a bomb shelter or in a waiting line for food or something like that. So a lot of candidates on our platform are not looking for opportunities right now. There has been definite improvements in global talent relocation to Canada since the global talent stream came out. But with COVID, it's made things a little bit slower, and we're seeing some delays. Although companies hiring from abroad has really become much more, accepted than it was a few years ago.
Yeah, is there any additional coordination you're having with federal, provincial governments right now beyond what you would normally for candidates because of these circumstances? Are they providing any additional support or coordination? Tying into that, I know in some recent coverage we had of kind of this initiative, you had noted the VanHack is providing additional kind of emergency immigration, relocation, financial and logistical assistance. Breaking down for us what that looks like would be pretty illuminating for our audience.
Yeah, so there has been a new visa that came out. I believe it was last Thursday, so it's fairly recent. It's allowed anyone with the Ukrainian passport to be able to come to Canada very quickly. It's not something that VanHack is especially working on with the government. It's just something that they did. It's made it a lot faster, about 14-day processing time, which is a lot faster than usual. And it's for anyone. It's not just tech talent, which is great. So we're working closely with the Council of Canadian Innovators on this, and they are more in touch with IRCC, or Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, the immigration department, I guess, for the government. We have seen faster processing times for Ukrainian visas because we had a few hires happen before the invasion, as I mentioned, and those hires we were submitting work permits for and getting approved in a few days rather than a couple of months that it's usually taking.
So let's switch over to you, Daryna. You run a product company. You're a Canadian / you happen to be living in San Francisco at the moment. So maybe if you could tell us what you've been doing and what is the efficacy of what you've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me. I think one of the best things that a tech company can do right now is supporting in terms of being able to hire folks from the region, being able to hire Ukrainians, because at the end of the day, if the economy suffers, there's like long-lasting impacts of the war and what has happened. In terms of what we've been doing as a product company, we're a business phone solution that is targeted primarily on the US and Canada in terms of our customers are startups and small businesses in US and Canada. But the one thing that we offer is we allow people to call and connect with folks around the world. And international calls, they still cost something, but we decided to make calls to Ukraine and messages to Ukraine free. I think that was a very immediate, easy decision to make, of course. And I think the reason why that was so fast for us is that my family, up until just recently, was in Ukraine. My parents, my grandma, we've been in touch over WhatsApp and a lot of times over like different messengers. But they were actually hiding in the area where I could not get in touch with them. And you can think software doesn't really, you're not saving people's lives. You don't really feel like that every day. But when I realized that, hey, I can use OpenPhone to call my mom because her phone connection is much stronger than her internet, and they were hiding and it was impossible to get in touch with them, that was like a moment for me to be like, holy, wow, just being able to reliably stay in touch was so important. So that was the first thing we did. We have opened an employee donation program, donated to a lot of different organizations. We've matched those donations. That was something that also we did very quickly. And I think the thing for me personally is just my family has just recently been able to get outside of the country. And I've just personally been in a state of mind that is very different from, I guess, what I've been trying to cope myself while all of this has been happening.
Have you seen in the technology ecosystem, in the innovation ecosystem, have you seen actions that organizations have been taking that you're like, that's a thing, that keep doing that? Aside from like the obvious, like a lot of companies have been boycotting, have you seen anything other than boycotts that you found particularly interesting or effective that you want to see replicated?
I think that I've seen interesting things happening at different scale. To me, a very memorable moment, and that's something we all expected, was Airbnb offering help. One thing that we have to consider is that there is a war, there is a crisis happening on so many different fronts. At this point, I've lost track, but it's likely above, maybe getting close to 4 million people, but 4 million people leaving their homes, trying to find safety. Obviously, Airbnb doing that is amazing. I've actually seen folks also in Canada and the US saying, hey, companies that own like short-term rentals offering free housing. I'm a big fan of helping in any way that you can, because yes, Airbnb can help on that scale. Maybe like a small software startup cannot help on that scale, but offering free service to Ukrainians, offering free service or heavily discounted service to organizations that are coordinating volunteers. The one thing I got really impressed by is just the amount of people who are volunteering and trying to help in any way. So any donations in terms of your software can help an organization coordinate charitable functions better, like that is helpful too. So I would just encourage people to think like, what is something I can do to help? you wouldn't likely be able to match Airbnb's impact yet, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't try.
Impacting one family who's trying to escape is impacting one family. It's like it's saving lives. So that's not a bad thing. And actually, we're recording this on the 22nd of March, and 10 million people have been displaced from their homes, and 3.9 million have left the Ukraine proper. So you're
not to put words in your mouth, Daryna, but it's definitely totally fucked.
And I think in some way, leaving, there is the psychological impact of this as well. I know a lot of startups helping creating services like, mental health support. I honestly don't know anyone who wouldn't need that right now because of also folks who have left too, right? Because there is such a heavy emotional toll of an uncertainty and not knowing really what's going to happen with your life. Mental health startups, any company, anyone can do something. Doesn't have to be crazy scale, something small, but that helps as well.
And so, Ilya, what have you seen, especially with your purview, that you've been like, that's a thing?
So actually, one of our competitors is a company called Relocate Me. They're from Europe, specifically from Ukraine, the founder, Andre. It's been incredible, his willingness to just drop everything and start supporting. He is in Ukraine right now. He can't leave. He actually started an aid van. So he's now running a nonprofit and has a van that he's basically loading up with as many supplies as possible. He's going to the Romanian border, getting medical supplies, backpacks, sleeping bags, and getting them to everyone in need. It's really impressive. Other thing I saw is the 1K project, which I believe is founded by Alex, who used to work at Techstars and now is an investor. And they've raised $2.8 million to help 2,300 families. And I know that's been kind of growing. So those are two projects that really caught my eye.
It's not often on this podcast that we would hear someone we're interviewing say, you should really check out something that our competitor is doing, which I think speaks to really not only your character, but also kind of the moment that we're dealing with right now. I'm wondering if either of you could speak to kind of the connecting ties between Canadian tech and the Ukraine tech scene, or just like Canadian tech to Ukraine. I know just what's going on in the Ukrainian tech scene, companies that they may be familiar with, that relationship there, just because it's your business to have a really global perspective on talent and companies and hiring there. And anything you could say to speak to that would be, I think, useful for people to understand just how potent Ukraine is when it comes to tech talent and some of the innovators that have come from there.
I will say that I'm familiar with the Ukrainian tech scene. One thing I will say is that a lot of great companies that people may not know come from Ukraine. I think the biggest story is Grammarly. They have huge presence in Ukraine. In the YC community, there are a lot of YC startups that have either Ukrainian founders or have ties to Ukraine. There are a lot of companies in Ukraine that work in the realm of connecting clients in the US and Canada with amazing developers. So here are some great Ukrainian companies you should be aware of. Of course, Grammarly, we talked about them. They're the sort of the staple of the Ukrainian tech community. We have startups like Preply, PetCube, which many of you will probably be aware of, Ajax Systems. There is GitLab. They have a Ukrainian founder. There is Lemon.io. There's People.ai, which I believe the founder is Ukrainian Canadian. Ukraine is home to a lot of great technical universities, which is the reason why you see a lot of great engineers coming out of the country. And I think this kind of speaks back to Ilya's point that there's a lot of amazing talent, and this is the time to kind of realize that many of them are going to be looking for new opportunities, and many of them are in the position right now to make some sort of change. But I would say that in terms of the startup community in Ukraine, I think that I'm simply impressed by the fact that when I see founders, like Ukrainian founders, there's a founder of a company called Lemon.io. He's quite prolific on Twitter, and he's been documenting the journey of being a wartime CEO. And I'm just insanely impressed by how these folks are running their business, taking care of their family, taking care of their team, helping the army, helping their community, and like doing all this with a lot of optimism, with a smile. Just puts things in perspective. I immediately consider my problems and realize that like I'm nowhere near that level. The whole community has stepped up, and how founders are doing things like they're kind of on all of those fronts, helping out their team, their family, their community. So that's been insanely impressive.
Ilya, from your perspective with VanHack and the fact that you have to kind of track global talent, What is your perspective on the Ukrainian tech scene and the talent coming out of there, and maybe the demand there, skill sets, just that kind of perspective?
With VanHack specifically, it's actually been a talent pool that we haven't really interacted with as much as we would thought we would, because a lot of the talent there is working remotely for North American or European companies and making an incredible living. So their willingness to relocate or switch jobs is not as high as talent from other parts of the world where we're more prevalent. And I think that's a testament to the amazing talent that is there, and how long companies have already been looking at the Ukraine as a software development engine for the world. Actually, I was interviewing one of our candidates who arrived from the Ukraine to Canada in 2020, and he was telling me actually one of the reasons he was interested in relocating to Canada was because he kept feeling like he was higher class than he should be, if I could put it that way. Like he was saying he's making more money than doctors and dentists and things like that because he was making international salary. And he said it kind of felt good to be upper middle class. And I thought that was kind of an interesting comment. But really, we know that there's a lot of really great talent there. We haven't seen too many people want to relocate. Of course, now that's kind of changing a little bit, but I think a lot of people don't want to leave their home country. They want to maybe go somewhere close by and then with hopes of coming back because it is a great place to live. So it's definitely interesting, that maybe difference between other places in the world.
So that's an interesting question. And I know like we've talked a lot in the past couple of years about kind of the focus, again, being super myopic on Canada, the talent gap here, the needs here in Canada, VanHack being one of the potential solutions there as we try to fill that talent pipeline. Is what's going on in Ukraine kind of changing your perspective of maybe some of the services that VanHack could facilitate or offer, given this sudden moment where people globally feel a little bit more connected and it's much more personal? Like, could you see your company being in a position to have more direct international connections and be maybe a two-way pipeline for talent? Because you're kind of in the middle right now of conversations between companies that can go either way, dependent upon conditions in the ground, whether it's being up to a higher pay and class status coming to Canada, people wanting to stay there and like run their company and then also fight for a homeland. Like, how are you seeing the role of a VanHack going forward, given, I guess, the changing nature of the conditions on either side that you play on?
We've always seen ourselves, or as kind of our ultimate goal is to be able to help anyone move anywhere and create a borderless world for tech talent. So it'd be really cool to help, Canadian tech talent move to Ukraine or places, like that, anywhere in the world. We started working with a company from Singapore recently, a company from New Zealand. We're looking to expand to different parts of the world. I think that'd be really exciting to help people from anywhere to move, instead of just like having a few receiver countries and a few, quote unquote, supply countries. Another thing we're seeing a lot of is just a rise in fully remote jobs. So people don't actually need to move, and that's totally cool with us.
I'm assuming because of COVID, and like the next thing I was just about to ask you was about like remote work. And previously we've talked about on this podcast, the two best things for like Canadian tech were shred credits and then cheaper salaries. So you had this great arbitrage for investing in Canada from the US. Now it's swapped, and you have Canadian talent getting paid US salaries and still working from home. Was that the beginning of kind of like breaking up the true geographical borders from how you play?
I think so. Although I will say that COVID has made candidates want to relocate more, because the benefit of living in a great country like Canada or Germany, another place we work in, has increased because the healthcare infrastructure is just better in those countries than the countries that the talent is in most cases. That has made the advantage of companies offering the relocation, I would say, greater. But there definitely is a challenge or a pressure, upward pressure on salaries all over the world. Another thing we're seeing is companies, when they hire fully remote, like we see a lot of Canadian companies saying, hey, I'm thinking of hiring just fully remote, not offering relocation, keeping that person in their home country. And I just tell them, well, you might as well just be paying US salaries because you're competing with the US. And we're seeing a lot of, especially South America, it's basically like the North American and South American tech scenes have merged into one because it's all one. There's a ton of US companies hiring very aggressively in LATAM right now.
That's actually a perfect segue, because I'm curious, Daryna, from your perspective, as you're not a new startup, you've been around for years, which is dog years, right? From a talent perspective, I think the Times had an article about how like even Russian talent is like, fuck this, we're leaving Russia because this is fucked up. So they're like relocating. And then there was the idea of like all these Ukrainian folks are at least temporarily, or maybe not so temporarily, leaving, and maybe they're not coming to North America, I imagine that there's further repercussions within the European market about talent and stuff like that. Are you thinking differently? Are there knock-on effects that you're seeing or you're expecting to see when you're hiring talent and it changes your calculus?
Yeah, so actually for us, we have been hiring remotely almost since the beginning. So from the strategy point of view, for every role that we have available, we're looking for people no matter where they are. There are some cases, some types of roles where having more overlap time zone wise is important. But for the most part, especially for roles like engineering, we can confidently hire folks no matter where they are. So I really think for us, and I think one thing we're seeing is that more companies are kind of going that way. And we are a US company. When we go to these markets, we also see candidates being incredibly, savvy, and you're paying essentially US salaries, right? So I see that happening, and we are playing in that world, and we are very excited to be able to hire people no matter where they are. And that's why also based on this situation, we can offer people to work at OpenPhone, whether they want to relocate, we can help with that, or if they choose to be in their home country or wherever else they want to go, we support that fully too. So we're just super flexible. And again, it's a crazy talent market there. We're doing whatever we can to hire the best people.
It would seem to me that the impacts of the war in Ukraine is that we've got a mobile talent pool, other than the fact that they may choose to move back or wherever they end up settling. But if these are information workers who can be anywhere, do you expect to see this instability actually doing anything? Or is it just going to be more of the same since it doesn't matter where people are?
There's obviously a growing population of Ukraine who gets into tech, and tech is so appealing. And I think to Ilya's point as well, you can make a great living working in tech. You can make more money than doctors. I really wish doctors were paid more, to be honest. But a lot of people who are in tech, for example, a lot of tech companies that operate in Ukraine actually early on were offering folks ability to move and relocate while continuing to keep their employment because they're remote. So a big part of that population, I think, will continue working remotely, and that will continue happening. Ukraine is a huge agriculture country. We're the bread basket of Europe. It's having huge implications on the economy. And I know I live in my tech bubble. So in my tech bubble, it all looks like, oh yeah, a lot of people working remotely. But if I go outside of my tech bubble, I see friends who are in positions where they cannot go back to their jobs. Like they have to do something else to earn a living. And sadly, that is just numbers wise, that is the majority.
So sadly, much of this conversation is tech bubble focused. I'm just curious, Ilya, from your perspective, do you see knock-on downstream effects, or is this just a mass migration from a tech perspective? I'm not talking about from a humanitarian or from actually does this economy work? Because you need more than tech for an economy to work. But I'm curious, as a global tech thing, is this just like a earthquake, but really people are just going to resettle and get jobs wherever they want to? Or is there's something more pernicious or grand coming out of this, do you think?
Yeah, I do think that we're seeing a lot more interest in relocation from Ukrainian tech talent than before. There was kind of I'm happy here, I'm making my 100K USD salary, living in Ukraine, living like a king or queen. But now it's kind of scary to stay living in your city, or in some cases your city's being...
I guess my question is not specifically about the Ukraine, because obviously it's more like, so you've got at least 4 million people leaving the country. A good chunk of those are probably information workers. So they're moving into Europe and North America and South America. They're kind of relocating themselves, and there's Russians leaving Russia. There's a mass migration that's happening, and these people are still talented. Does that change the landscape for entrepreneurs and for developers? Are there knock-on effects, or is it just going to be like, yeah, they live here now?
I do think there'll be a little bit more talent in coming into the Canadian market. Maybe not a huge amount, but a few thousand engineers or so, or probably more. I don't think it'll be too big of a change though, because they'll just keep working where they are. I do see more people moving into European and Canadian jobs versus maybe working remotely for US companies.
Yeah. So like a little bit, kind of a continuation of what you've been seeing probably since the pandemic, right?
No, it's more extreme now because people really they can't live in their home country anymore, and so they're looking for visas and new homes. A lot of times, in order to have that visa, they need a job, and they'd like to work for a local company in Europe or in Canada versus keep working remotely in an agency or something like that for US customers.
Let's dig into that a bit because I think part of the balance that I think Rob and I have been trying to walk in this conversation is one of in being a podcast focused on Canadian tech and tech from a Canadian perspective, keeping it within a framework through which we'd be comfortable providing information and having you on as guests and representatives. And then in every moment, having to maybe qualify that with putting aside the horrors of the circumstance. You consider people that relocate through VanHack as people having their lives changed. And that's generally framed as a positive, proactive step towards opportunity. You were starting to describe circumstances where people are making very difficult follow-on decisions based upon circumstance and maybe a need to get out. And I'm wondering if we can use that to open up just what we feel like the impact this is having on people's lives, whether it is the people that you're helping relocate or Daryna's talking about her family getting out of the country to safety and how much of that pervades all the conversations that you're having, whether it's with these people, your employees, other collaborators in the space that are looking to just provide aid and support.
For us, when we say life change, it usually is a proactive thing where the person's living in a country that they aren't really looking to stay in long term, and they want to find better quality of life in another country. Unfortunately, this is a terrible tragedy that's happening, and we're trying to be one way for them to find a new home. And it's not everyone, and maybe it's 5 for now, maybe it's 10 in the future, who knows, 15. We're just trying to help a few people that in the way that we can. And it's definitely hard to hear their stories and stories of their friends and what's going on, but it's also really nice to see. We had one candidate, for example, getting a job offer from a Calgary company, and he wrote us on Slack saying because of the job offer, he was able to leave to Poland with his wife, who's pregnant, and now is relocating to Calgary.
I think that's a great articulation of some of the knock-on effects, because we're talking about this in a context of, from our perspective, it's really easy to feel even just using the geographical borders are kind of non-existent now because of what tech and software can provide. And then there's some very, very hard lines where, particularly related to kind of government status and physical transportation, where those lines come back very hard, and it becomes very important to be able to either have documentation or a pathway to somewhere safer. Daryna, you've been dealing with this kind of like within the context of your family. I don't want to mine that for podcast entertainment. I'm just wondering if there's anything else here that you think our audience, which you know pretty well, of people in the Canadian tech environment would want to know, would be helpful for them, or maybe make a connection on what you're just dealing with as a person, as a founder right now.
So going back to the fact that not when faced with this situation, there are people in Ukraine who would not leave, like no matter what, they would not leave. And then there are people who, and like it's everyone's choice, people who want to leave and who want to bring their families elsewhere, obviously for safety. And I think that with the best we can do as a community, as a Canadian tech community, is really offer our help to those, there's something we can offer. And I think Canadian tech companies can definitely offer extra help. If you were to hire someone and relocate them, think about all the ways that you can help, not just them, but their family. Because if they're moving, they're bringing they're literally leaving their lives. And they're leaving their lives, I should mention the nuance here. In many cases, as a reaction, it wasn't aspirational, let me go have a better life. Like many times they're just faced with that very difficult choice. It's also sometimes a very rushed decision. It's kind of like they're not really taking much with them. It's like a few things they have. So they're literally coming essentially empty-handed to a new country where they have to think about all the things we take for granted for them, for their kids, for all those little things. Tech companies who are able to hire these folks, going above and beyond to make sure they are supported for all areas of their lives. They can get integrated socially, they can get integrated culturally, they seem little to us, but it's extra stress. Just sort of almost like going back to the fact that helping one person, helping one family is very important. I also want to give a shout out to all amazing. There's so many folks offering complementary services. Like I found a lot of lawyers offering immigration help or free consultations. Again, seems like something small, and you may say, okay, cool, it's like a 30-minute consultation, but that relieves a lot of stress because it helps people understand what options they have, and it helps them make the right decision for their family. So
yeah, Ilya, do you want to even just provide, because like this is part of stuff that VanHack does, bringing people over, right? And normally that's in Daryna said, a much more aspirational environment. Can you talk about some of those little things that help in the best of times any Canadian employer bring someone over to a new country and a new city, and which things now might be like more hyper important? And even just, is that process of maybe one person coming over and bringing the family now been compressed to everyone trying to get over at once? You have kind of hands-on experience with this process of talent migration, and it'd be really interesting to just see how that might be changing or open up that to our listeners.
So we usually see people immigrating as a family. What we would say is best practice is 1 month housing, flights for the family, or if that's too much, maybe if you have 3 or 4 kids, that could be pricey, maybe just for the spouse. I would say in this case, with the Ukraine specific, be as generous as possible. And also little things like picking them up at the airport with a sign that's really nice, making a welcome package, having some food delivered to their house, helping get set up with a SIN number, the provincial medical system, schools, hospitals. All those kind of things are really important, helping them actually find their apartment, not just like temporary housing, but the actual place to stay longer term. Another thing that we do at VanHack is we have WhatsApp groups for different cities that our candidates or VanHackers, as we call them, have moved to. And we add the candidate to that city WhatsApp group, and they have kind of a community of friends who've gone through a similar experience that they can lean on. We've had people ask every question you can imagine, any recommendations for a dermatologist, or what's your favorite restaurant, or things like that. Or we even had VanHackers go to IKEA together. So it's pretty fun that way, and kind of once people relocate and having that support, which I think it's really important, because you don't feel like you're alone. And I know a lot of companies do a lot more things like that as well, not just within VanHack. I would say those are best practices, and we're having our first relocation, I guess, in 3 days now from Ukraine. And so we'll keep you updated on how that goes. She has a husband and 2 kids, so it is a family affair in this case as well.
Yeah, those are some great things that I think, like, if BetaKit were to be hiring internationally, we would want to do for any future employee. But like, particularly in an instance where maybe they're not coming with everything they would want to have with them in these circumstances, like, become much more tangible.
Yeah, another signing bonus definitely helps as well. So they have some spending money to buy furniture and new clothes or whatever they might need.
On this point of things that you normally don't think about that are very valuable from an employer perspective, maybe these are pretty sort of straightforward, but I know a lot of people work with Ukrainian. There are lots of agencies, lots of sort of like vendors you might have in Ukraine, paying them not just on time, but like thinking about, hey, can we maybe pay you even upfront to allow you to have more resources? Because we're looking into ways to work with more sort of like agencies or support more local businesses in Ukraine. I know companies that offered to their team members in Ukraine, they actually paid them 2 or 3 months of salary sort of like upfront, just so they have financial resources and they feel more secure. If your startup can do that, that's insanely helpful.
So my parents escaped Hungary in the 1956. They called it the Hungarian Revolution, but that's when the communists came in and the Hungarians tried to revolt, and they shot all the Hungarians, and they still took it over. And a bunch of people escaped, and my mom and grandmother were one of those, and then my dad escaped in the 70s in the modern version of communism. So what's so fascinating about the juxtaposition to me is, so I'm a first-generation Canadian as a result of all of that. And we were immigrants. My grandmother started a foundry where they melted metal. That's what she did in the 50s. Like, what the fuck? So it's striking to me, the juxtaposition. This is not a conversation I think anybody expected to be having in 2022 about people escaping a country, but look at the diaspora that the immigration has caused in Canada and the States and built those countries to be what they are. They are a country of immigrants. And so I'm curious, it's also something we've covered, I mean, since the inception of not only this version of the podcast, but Douglas, since 2015, whenever we started the BetaKit podcast, it's like, what is tech's civic duty? What are our responsibility? And I think over the last few years, we've seen people sort of this vestigial gestation of we're not just tech companies. We actually have a duty to the societies within which we live. Do you think the tech and innovation ecosystems in Canada and the States, are they actually stepping up to their duties and realizing that they're actually part of this society? Are you seeing the right kind of actions?
Definitely. I think tech's response to the invasion, to the war, has been much greater than I expected. I think tech has stepped up, again, going back from big companies like Airbnb to tiny startups. We saw Pork leave Russia. And the one thing we saw there is the fact that by leaving Russia, they decided to specifically stand against what's happening. And I know that must have made huge impact given how many folks in Russia rely on Upwork. Those Airbnb and Upwork are probably two really big examples of how a tech company can make a really big impact. We see companies like Zapier donating, I think they donated more than $1 million. We see Grammarly donated, I think they donated all of their profits, all of the revenue they got from Russia and Belarus, they donated that to humanitarian efforts in Ukraine. I've been really inspired and encouraged by the response. Of course, we can always do more, but again, going back to small things people can do that they're the things in their control, things that they can influence in their own community.
Ilya, I'm interested in if you feel the same way that Daryna does, because we've definitely seen large and small companies taking direct actions here in this circumstance. I'm very interested in how you feel about it, because you play much closer to where governments interact, right? All of the work that you do is in some way informed by visas or government policies or how many people can come in and stuff like that. And I'm just wondering if you feel like the response at a political level from the ecosystem has mirrored some of the direct actions that we've seen. And I just can't help but think back to 2017 when the Canadian tech community was responding to the Trump travel ban. There was much more of a unified call to ask government to do something about that. And I'm wondering if you're feeling like that's missing, if it's happening behind the scenes, or maybe it's not needed because the government was already there, or because tech companies are able to act more directly, as Daryna had articulated. Again, you just play in so many interesting spaces here that I'm wondering if you're feeling as good about it as Daryna is.
Yeah, actually, I am. I'm not usually one to praise the government or so much. There's definitely a lot more that they could be doing, and we all need to be holding them accountable. But in this case, I am impressed with how quickly they moved on creating the visa specifically for Ukraine. And I will say also a lot of countries in Europe have done similar programs. I don't think there's been such a large call for it from Canadian tech because it has already been done. So far, we've seen good traction and movement from the government in terms of visa applications and approvals. So I think from that point of view, it's been good. I definitely have other things I think could improve, but we'll save those for later.
Related to this circumstance, or this the general Ilya's thoughts on government kind of stuff?
General thoughts on work permits and things like that. It's just a never-ending improvement cycle, I think, that governments are in battle for tech talent. And if you can make your country be much more easy to relocate to, you'll be getting more great talent. I think Canada needs to launch a digital nomad visa, for example. There's other stuff, but
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to the day we can have you back on and talk about the normal talent stuff rather than the insanely critical global crisis informed stuff. And I want to thank you both for just coming on and helping us kind of raise awareness of what's going on, the work that you're doing, and how anybody listening to this podcast could participate in that.
I just want to say my pleasure. I've been a fan of the BetaKit podcast since 2016, so it's really great to be on. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was great. It was there's been a bit of conflict, like on a personal level versus from a tech community level. So definitely not a conversation I expected to have. And hopefully next time we chat, it's going to be on a bit more positive note.
Yeah, boring is good.
Boring is good. We could use a little bit more boring in 2022. The BetaKit podcast is produced by BetaKit Incorporated. It's edited by Katie Lohr, and its hosts are Rob Kennedy and me, Douglas Saltis. To learn more about how you can support this podcast, head to patreon.com/BetaKit.